Hello, I'm Chris Gilbert, and I wanted to do. This is going to be one of the philosophy videos, and I'm just going to talk about a few different subjects actually. But I'm going to start off talking about. So I've been out for a walk today, and I was just like running memories through your head as you do, and I remember a very early vivid thought that I had when I was a teenager. And this thought was, I'm going to tie this in with some more further elaborations on what we're sort of transitioning into, I think, in some respects, culturally, technologically, all the rest of it. Now, this thought was, and it's only a thought, but when I was a teenager, I vividly remember having the thought that when there will one day come a day when humanity will be gone, but all things like this, recordings, visual recordings, will somehow survive. So it was a disturbing thought. It disturbed me at the time. It was, sort of that a thought of the extinction of the human race, which obviously at the minute is quite a I think it's the elephant in the room in terms of like the most extreme case of what a lot of people are worrying about at the minute, with the speeding up of technologically driven society. With obviously we've got 2 wars going on at the minute, which is an incredibly it's not just an existential risk, it's causing actual death and destruction across the globe. And yeah, things have got pretty are going downhill. The economy in the country I live in is just in a recession basically, and there's a lot of cope from politicians to try and deal with that. Further afield, Israel and Palestine is becoming an actual it's becoming a political fighting ground, and there is horrendous repression from Israel. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about that subject. I'm not an expert in the Israeli-Gaza conflict, so I'm not going to. Obviously, I'm against what the Israelis are doing to the Palestinians, but that's not the subject of this video. Though obviously, I hope that there will be a ceasefire as soon as possible. It goes without saying, I think. But anyway, onwards. So the other big existential question that is floating around everybody's heads at the minute is, what effect is AI going to have on our culture and our society, and how are we going to deal with that question? Now, I relate this to what I'm sort of riffing on, because I think we already are trapped in our screen. I mean, I'm literally talking to myself on a video screen at the minute, right? That alone is quite a strange thing. You tried to explain that to somebody even 50 years ago, they would have been like, what? Before mass media was a thing, really. Was even a concept, really. I mean, well, it might have been a concept in a way, but it wasn't. We're in it now, basically. And what are we going to do when essentially, Sora's just been released, Sora AI, if you don't know. That's going to obviously have a fundamental shift in the way that we engage with technology and the screens that we are all, in many respects, trapped in a way. We're in a sort of loop. You could call it a cybernetic loop. And funnily enough, I actually wrote about all this stuff quite a few years ago, about how, well, it was in relation to art theory, but how we have to become cybernetic loops as artists that can reflect and reform the chaos. That's the exact words I used in the writings. The artist engineer art theory that I basically developed over some years. And yeah, we've gone beyond that point now, actually. So I think there is that like trend is still ongoing, but in terms of like sort of this, it's what you could call a neo-Dadaism in digital culture, I suppose, of reassembling and remixing constantly. I mean, remixing has been going on for a long time, but I just mean that whole thing of that we have this informational density, this like complex. We're living in increasingly complex, dense information. Not even information rich. It's actually information. It's information rich. Well, in terms of the actual data being processed and all that, it's obviously it's quite. The computational power has increased, right? But our ability to comprehend what's going on is going. If you believe the people who are, the forefront of all this technology, is starting to reach a limit, right? Apart from the most, there are, and basically from the research I've been doing into looking a lot at what people who are a lot cleverer than I am about artificial intelligence are saying, there's basically been a split has emerged in those fields of AI doomerism, and it's not just people with a fairly limited amount of understanding about AI realizing the risks. It's actual AI experts. Conor Leary, I think, is one of the leading voices in this field. But then on the other side, you've got the sort of utopians who accelerationists. We just have to accelerate it as much as possible, see what happens. Now, to relate this philosophically to a thinker who I've not really read, I'm not that well read with his philosophy, but obviously we are in an age of the Baudrillard's simulation simulacra, right? In some respects, that is a text I really do need to grapple with. I need to read. That is going to be on my to-read list, I think, this year. I have to read that text. But yeah, we are. The thing I fear, I think, is that we're going to go into an age, and we're already in it. We're already in the cusp of it, really, of being unable to tell if anything is true. Now, I know there is some technology being developed around the AI safety and that sort of thing, but it just provides probably too much opportunity for bad actors. Even if you consider the world completely rationally, which I actually don't believe the world conforms completely to rational. We rationalize the world to try and make sense of it, but the world doesn't conform to rational rules, I don't believe. And I think nature, as in and I don't, by that I don't mean the trees and that sort of romantic, idealistic vision of nature. Nature is chaotic. Nature is violent. Nature is unpredictable. We can analyze it. We can, empirically sort of measure things in nature. And even if AI, in the most extreme scenario, becomes sentient, kills us all off, and we evolve. We have a co-evolve with it, or we get wiped out completely, or whatever. AI will be an emergent property of nature, right? It's from, if it's come from us, it'll be an invention from us. Therefore, it's still a part of nature, right? It's not separate from nature. We have this whole, I think people romanticize nature too much. Basically, is the point I'm making. So, I'm not going to try and build up an entire metaphysics here on the spot, but basically, I think, we're going into uncharted territory. Now, arguably, we always are. We're always emerging into something that's not, predictable, because the world isn't predictable. But the problem with artificial intelligence, I guess, if there is one, is the fact that it does pose in it. I think from all the what I've been looking into, it does pose some sort of existential threat to so many areas of we're going to have a new normal, I guess, right? So a new normal will emerge in culture and in the world itself, which will be incredibly chaotic. And I think we've already had the profound effects of social media, but also the misuses of it, like Cambridge Analytica, all these different bad political actors and associated organisations who have fed that, which has really made us into a less intelligent world in the deepest sense of the word of that, right? and I don't mean just intelligence in terms of, you know, raw computational and brain power, right? I mean in the ability to have a real sense of what's going on and what direction we can all collectively go in to at least improve things for most people, if not all, right? Which is a bit of a garbled way of putting it, but we are in uncharted waters, you know. We are going into something that we don't understand, and has ever been thus, right? And maybe some of it is hype. I really like it's that's the point. When the actual information space gets poisoned, once the well of that gets poisoned so much, which it will do within this year, I think it's going to become increasingly impossible to tell if something that you see on a screen is true or false in the most literal sense of the word. And that is terrifying. I mean, I've already seen examples where, say for example, like, you know, say someone wanted to create a copy of this video and completely change everything I said based on a few minutes of this video. They could feed that into, I don't know, something like Sora, for example, and every single word and every, you know, and it would look the same, right? Would be able to be completely remixed, changed at a whim. My voice would be able to be synthesized. Now this fundamentally, it was pretty obvious really, fundamentally changes our relationship to technology, because once we cannot determine if what is true ever, we are literally almost becoming, it's like a becoming like a schizophrenia of the collective imagination, right? Because the collective imagination is modeled in some respects through our information systems. You can tie it in with Jung and everything else, the collective unconscious. These machines are a meta reality, if you will. I don't mean meta in the terms of the company, I mean in terms of metaphysics of the collective human imagination. Now we fed the collective human imagination into something that may become profoundly more intelligent in terms of, you know, ability and everything else than the most intelligent human being. Now, if that doesn't terrify you, then it should. Because what is intelligence without some sort of moral grounding, right, or some sort of ability to make informed, sentient decisions, right? That's the terrifying part, I suppose. And this also ties in with the whole thing of alignment, right? So the idea that once this thing comes into fruition, which some people think it might happen in 5 years, some people think it might be happening this year. What the are we going to do with that power? And it's probably not going to be in our hands at a certain point. And I'm not like a doomer. I'm still trying to figure this stuff out. I'm like everybody, you know, everyone who's got a heart, I suppose. It's going to have huge, profound effects, obviously, on jobs. I have a job now, which is nice. I've had a year of unemployment. That was a fun year. And I'm not like I'm not like hyper skilled, but I have, worked with computers most of my life, have a degree, blah blah blah. I have a job now, which is good, but I've had a bloody struggle for the last year, and I'm a skilled person. I've been to university. I can program in JavaScript. I know how to write web applications. I can do painting. I can write relatively well. By any measure, I'm a fairly intelligent, smart, middle class, I guess, man as well. And I have just been like, what am I going to do? My vision, my entire idea of what the future is going to be has been shifted so radically that, and obviously the economics and everything is just in such chaos, and the distribution of wealth is now becoming so unequal that it does feel sometimes that we are heading into something that is dark, that is going to be almost like a technological dark age, right? Some nefarious thing is lingering in the air, right? And that's terrifying. It terrifies me. I mean, it keeps me up at night sometimes thinking about this stuff, because I think the world, we're going to go through a lot of changes, and I think if you're not scared about it on some existential level, just of like the threat not only to yourself but to the entire world, then I think you're blinded by optimism, really. Now, I'm also not a pessimist. I'm trying to develop what I would term a realistic approach, or a realistic understanding, really, more so, of AI and how we're going to deal with this. I recently had an interesting conversation with a friend of mine who I work with, who's in terms of the actual technology driving it, is much more informed than me. And he said to me recently, and I do think there is some validity in this, that AI has to be regulated at the level of, there will be like engineers who will basically be what he was describing to me. We had a short conversation about this, and he said he believes that it has to almost become like, has to be some level of regulation around this, in terms of, if you're like, I don't know, say if this is only hypothetical, I'm not saying this is literally how it will be, but that we will have to develop, I think, some sort of regulatory framework around how you use AI and how it's applied to the world. Now, maybe this is idealistic, right? I mean, there's all this, Elon Musk has just started suing OpenAI around them going more closed source. I don't really have much to say on that. I've not really read deeply into it, so I'm not going to bother commenting too much. But that, I mean, my first reaction was, well, that's basically just cynical power play to, hurt the competition, as it were. I don't know. Obviously, Elon Musk invested in OpenAI, and probably is just like a little butthurt right there, I guess. But I don't know. Like I said, I'm not really read into it that much, so I won't comment further on that. But yeah, it's just, I think for myself, what I'm trying to do is, I am an engineer by nature. I've been an engineer for most of my life. I'm feeling the weathered part of my soul that's just feels fairly weathered from it, but I do recognise that the technology's here and we have to try and deal with it. What was I saying before? So the conversation I had, basically, that would be, you'd have, if we develop this technology, programmers will probably have to have some sort of standards body or something. They say, you can't just do anything with AI. It's like my friend who chatted about, so for example, you can 3D print some sort of gun right at the minute. Now, obviously, if we exist in a world where everyone could just 3D print guns, then if the governments or the powers that be allow that to happen, just on a mass scale, it would be completely chaotic. And that's where I think regulation comes in terms of AI in some respect. And I do think it's important that we take it relatively slow, instead of just steamrolling into something we really don't understand. I don't think it will be that long until we have some sort of AI related disaster, whether it be from releasing something too early, or just miscalculating the effects that something might have, if it's released too early as well. So yeah, it's interesting times. I'm going to leave it. This is a funny philosophy, but I'll leave it there. So I always do these videos of about 20 minutes. What do you think? I mean, how do you see this fundamentally tectonic shifting paradigm shift in our culture and in its historic? We're reaching a historical moment, probably. I've not even covered half the avenues you could explore with this question. There's a lot more that I could go into, I suppose, but I'll leave it here. That was obviously just like a bunch of reeled off thoughts. I won't bother wasting too much more of your time, but yeah, what do you think? Where are we going with this? Do you think there is going to be some, at least silver lining to the way how everything's got feels so terrible and just overwhelmingly oppressive in the history at the minute, current like actual existence at the minute. It's oppressive sometimes, it feels like. So yeah, I'll try and end on I think there are potentially like a lot of good points that could come from AI. It just really obviously depends how it's rolled out, and it's such a huge unknown. And obviously, as human beings, we're all terrified of the unknown. Why wouldn't we be? But it can also prompt, no pun intended, opportunity, I suppose. But yeah, I'm still fairly cautious of it. I think, in general, we need to create really, really well thought out ethics around the whole thing, really, and soon. Otherwise, we are going to emerge into a very chaotic, unstable, and increasingly unequal world as well. I'll leave it at that. Have a good evening or morning. I'm Chris. Bye.